Welcome to Insights, Ideal's free monthly webinar series, specially designed for parents and families of gifted or twice exceptional learners. In each session, our expert presenters provide homeschooling families with strategies to help their exceptional students thrive. We're delighted to have you with us. And remember, your support through donations is always appreciated.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our next webinar for parents and teachers from Ideal for Gifted. This evening, I have a dear friend with me, Dr. Barry Gelston. He's a dedicated, creative, and compassionate person and educator with many credits to his name. So forgive me if this is a little bit long. His undergraduate degree is in psychology. His doctorate is from Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity in Education from Los Angeles, California, and where he earned his certificate in twice exceptional education. Dr. Gelston is an expert in neurodiversity and cognitive diversity. He created the Gelston Scale of Cognitive Diversity in 2024, which operationally defines a worker and learners' strengths based on their unique neurodiversity profile. He works in partner with Dr. Karen Arnstein, who created the spiral model of development and has contributed to the research by defining the process of adaptive connection, which is used by educational professionals to support 2E learners and which is generalizable to the broader population. He is a principal researcher at SPIRE, the Spiral Institute of Research in Education, is a presenter at state and national conferences on such topics as insights on tools used by quality educators to support 2E learners. Dr. Gelston created Mr. Gelston's one-room schoolhouse, which is how I first met him, where he has, for the past 14 years, specialized in working with students who are non-standard learners that do not respond well to the math instruction that is procedural and rote. He goes to the concept first, letting students develop their own conceptual understanding so that the procedures flow naturally from their understanding. The result is happy, confident student who is able to see the big picture and can use their new knowledge to solve problems in creative ways and have a strong understanding of mathematics. Dr. Gelston has been the president and leading member of the Gifted Homeschoolers Forum for several years. He served as a financial chair for SANG, that's the Supporting the Emotional Needs of the Gifted, and a professor at Bay Path College, where he taught elementary school teachers how to teach math. He is on the G-Word Advisory Board and Global Partnership Network. He's a member of NAGC, Twice Exceptional and Special Interest Group. He's also on the board of the Massachusetts Association for Gifted Education. He is a very busy man. And I'm so glad that he has agreed to be with us this evening. Thank you very much, Barry.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stewart. It is, you are one of my favorite people in our industry. You're one of the kindest, bestest, gooderest people. And it's always a pleasure to work with you. And it's always a special moment when I get to even just hang out with you. So it's a big deal for me to be interviewed by you and to do this podcast. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, we've talked and had many conversations about gifted and 2E students and how adults best help serve them. But I also know that perhaps your first love may have been math and teaching it in non-traditional ways. So let's start at the beginning. What do you mean by a non-standard learner?
Great question. So non-standard learner I mean, well, first I have to answer the question of what is a standard learner. And basically it's that child who seems very comfortable, that 20% of students that seem to just be in the sweet spot for any teacher. They go to school, they're happy, they go, they do well. And then there's everybody else. And you know, our system is built mostly for that median student. I like to joke that the median student is about 1/10 of 1% of the population, which is actually not funny, right? And everybody else is, you know, some combination of a lot of different traits, and especially in the gifted and 2E community, that flies off the chart even more so with asynchrony and the exceptionalities and um and you know the intensities and all of those things that we talk about with gifted kids. So all of these things have to be taken into account. So, and also a big part of this is in math education is that there's the assumption that most learners are very comfortable doing procedural and rote work, and that the non-standard are the geometry learners. And I question that, and I don't accept that because I feel that that's for people who don't understand that math is a beautiful combination of both geometry and numbers and procedures, and that you can't understand one without the other. So let me just start with that.
That helps a lot. But of all the subjects, why math?
Well, it goes back to the 1970s, actually back to the 60s, because I'm from back then. Uh, when I was a little boy, I used to go with my grandfather to the shops where he'd go pick up food. And back then, there wasn't just one big grocery store for everything. It was a lot of small shops. And one of the things that he would love to do, which I was just fascinated by being 4 or 5 years old, is that he would have a race with the cash registers. And then the cash registers were things you punch in the prices, and then you go pull it arm down, and then it comes up. And he would love to go down all the numbers first and beat the cash register. And so to me, I thought that's just what people do. So I love numbers and counting, and it just became a love in my life. And because I love my grandfather so much. And so that got stuck in me early on. And that's where I think the initial bug for me to love math comes from.
That's awesome. Well, if you love math so much, then how did you get into the gifted and 2E field?
Well, that really came a long time later. And I'm somebody who is a career changer over the years. And it's kind of funny because I had, as a kid in school, I wanted to grow up to be a math teacher, but then life took me on different journeys, and I worked in nonprofit, and then I worked in business and computer programming and sales and a gazillion different things uh, until I made the decision that I really don't like that stuff. And I really do want to teach math. So somewhere around 40, I moved into teaching math. I went back, got my master's in math education at Cambridge College, and and that's how I became a math teacher. And but that got cut short because I became a homeschool parent after a few years into that. So the next best thing for me was I started teaching online, and and I this was about 14 years ago. I accidentally fell into this whole niche of students that seemed to just connect with me and I with them. And so here I am, this guy who's like, hey, I really like these gifted kids. I get how they think. They get how I think. I don't have to explain myself to them and vice versa. And it just became a love affair. Not much longer after that did I start getting deeper involved with nonprofits in the gifted and 2E world, and getting into 2E was funny because when I started hearing the expression, I was like, well, it's a buzzword. I don't know what that means. And then, like many of us who get involved in this world and start to find our identity, I was like, oh, wait a second. That's me. I'm one of them. I'm a kid who grew up with dyslexia issues. I don't know if you know anybody else like that, Dr. Stewart. And right. And so, why was it I was so good at math, but I was always messing up the word problems and struggling to read and all of this stuff didn't fully come together until I got deeper and deeper involved in gifted and twice exceptional education. And it worked really. I like working with this population too. It worked well because my undergraduate degree was in psychology. So I always think of learning as something you need to do, start from a place of calm and relaxation. I don't believe in pressure. And matter of fact, back in the old days, there was a lot of research in the behavioral theories, even that if you have too much stress and tension in the old motivational theories, that you can't focus and relax and learn a new complicated skill. You can only be pushed harder to know a skill that you already know. So for me, I had that early impression that was, how do I remove energy from the system? And I found that uh, pedagogy itself was less important. Not that it isn't important, and I take it very seriously, but the first part of it is that how do you take the tension and the stress out of the learning environment? And I found in particular working in the gifted homeschool world, which is where my client base was for teaching math, hi Kat, was that there was a lot of pain for kids who were homeschooled and they had to be taken out of school because everything was just disconnected for them. There was a school mismatch. I'm not saying anything new, but what I know is that I started doing something which I learned later was a common term, which was deschooling. So in math, I didn't realize, but I was deschooling while I was teaching math because I would try to remove the stress as much as I could, make it a fun, happy, relaxed place to learn. And while I did that, I used a lot of the standard pedagogy that I was taught in my math education program, and that worked really well. So I don't think I fully answered the two EPs for you, but go
No,
ahead.
yeah. So I've run across a lot of very bright kids who are very competent in manipulating numbers, but who, for whatever reasons, have a lot of math anxiety. Um, it's as if they can manipulate numbers, but they don't feel like they like math, nor do they feel like they understand mathematics.
Hmm.
So I kind of separate those two. To me, being able to manipulate numbers is more arithmetic
Or
and
number sense,
number sense. Yeah.
right?
However, mathematics is a lot more than that. And I think that's kind of the awareness that these gifted kids have, that there's a lot more to it. And that's the scary part. So I noticed on your website that you talk about how to help kids with math anxiety. I was wondering if you would give us some thoughts about that.
So I'd be happy to. I want to come back to that because I think it sets up with what you were saying, is that a lot of kids, and by the way, not all gifted kids have good number sense. Some of them are
Correct.
actually dyscalculic and
Mm,
dysgraphic, and they're dissed all over the place, right? And
right.
so, and a lot of gifted kids that have come to me over the years are really the kids who started to read early, and but not necessarily math, but they didn't realize that they were good at math. And the reason why they didn't realize that is that they were put into situations where who they were as a math thinker didn't naturally come into uh, didn't actually necessarily come through. And I started to joke early on that all my students were from Missouri. They're from the show me state. And because they
Yeah.
want to know, why is this happening? And they're the why kids. They're like that the terrible twos kid who's always asking why, except they really do want to know why. It's not just a reflexive statement. And that once I started to explain, like I talked about in the uh, on the website a little bit, which is that they needed to know the concept first. And
Mhm.
as I would teach them the basic concept, which by the way is actually what the Common Core movement has been, which people
Mm.
don't get, is that once you introduce the concept, teach some of the basic rules, especially in the young grades, just associative property, commutative property, distributive property. Once you do that, and then you start to move into, the, how you do long multiplication, long division, even back then, you're like, oh, wait, I'm just using that rule again. And I don't have to show them the standard method to do things because they've already figured out their own way to do it, which makes sense to them. And that's the other piece too, is that gifted 2E kids, they think the way that they want to think. And you're not going to tell them to think a different way. I mean, part of being that smart is that you get to be that stubborn too. And so it has to be set up to them. You're doing more setup and saying, here's how you do it, but here are the rules behind it. How would you go about this? And so that's part of how to defeat the math anxiety. But the math anxiety doesn't necessarily die down for like 9 months or a year. When after starting to work with a student, and there isn't some magical thing, and I want to say this clearly too, is that there's no such thing as quote unquote math anxiety. There's
Ah.
anxiety to experiences while learning math.
Mhm.
It's not like there's some special thing in the brain which is math anxiety, and it may not have been meant or intended to mean that when the psychologists would talk about math anxiety. They were just trying to say that you have anxiety while doing math. It's not some intrinsic thing that's born into you. And it's a reaction, it's an environmental reaction.
Right.
So you have to go back and you have to reduce the energy in the system, relax, calm down, and start getting some small wins. And then over time, building that confidence slowly so that a year later, it's a whole different conversation. You sit down, relax. Hey, how are you today? Good. And so my last student, we got on. We're still pretty new, getting to know each other, and but it starts off with sharing the pictures that she made, on the whiteboard that I share with her, and her cats and their names, and we relax, and then we start to do some math. And there's some stress and anxiety because she's still getting to know me, and she doesn't want to be wrong in front of Dr. Gelston,
Right.
Mr. Gelston. And but after a while, she learns that it's not a big deal to make a mistake. And oh, by the way, because of my dyslexia, I make my own set of math mistakes. And we laugh at my math mistakes. So the great big Mr. Gelston, Dr. Gelston math expert is just another guy who makes mistakes,
Mhm.
and that I have to fix them. And I like that. I don't like being that, what's that expression, the sage on the stage. And,
Right.
think about all those math teachers that they go to a math class and they have 30 kids in it, and they have all the steps written out on paper and exactly how to do it just right. And they write it and they show it, and the kids look and they go, wow, that teacher knows everything. I'll never know that. Well, I mess stuff up with them all the time. And it's a thing. Hey, look, yeah, I'm pretty good. Did a lot of math and all that stuff, but I still make basic dumb mistakes with. To me, the hardest thing in math is long multiplication, long division, right? And someone will ask me, is calculus hard? And I'm like, no harder than long division and long multiplication.
That's for
You
sure.
know, it's a pain in the neck. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, I think a big part of reducing the anxiety for our students, because our students, both gifted and 2E, tend to be perfectionistic. So if they don't know or don't believe that they know the answer before they even start, then, or that it's a comfortable place anyway, then what seems to sort of jam them up is that they're fearful that they might make a mistake. So I think part of teaching, particularly this population, our population, is to model making mistakes. And
Yeah.
I'm a lousy speller, so I actually ask the students to please watch my spelling and let me know when I've
Yeah.
missed something. Yeah, because I think that's part of teaching this population in particular.
I
So,
want to get to something you just said. I know you're getting ready to go on to the next question, but I think this is important for, a lot of the people that would tune in to your podcast, which is that what we lose track of is that a lot of these kids, because they're gifted kids,
mhm,
a lot of their early learning are innate built-in capabilities,
mhm,
right? They learn to read early.
right.
They have excellent early number sense, and it just comes naturally. And it's like, wow, where did that come from? 2 times 7, 14. Hey, yeah, I'm good, right? But that's just number sense. And they build a whole identity. And this is something I've done
Right.
presentations on in the past. And they build this gifted math identity that they're supposed to have immediate knowledge, and that it's almost like, a gift from God that just pops in and out of their heads, and they're imbued with it. And the challenge in learning math is that you're not bringing back existing knowledge. You're not Plato looking for, inner knowledge from self. What you really are doing is you're problem solving and trying taking some rules and trying it. And a lot of that anxiety for a lot of gifted kids is that they have to flip out of that mindset. And that's another way of saying fixed mindset versus growth mindset.
Right.
And 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 what we don't always look at that growth and fixed mindset discussion is how it's self-preservation and identity self-preservation. So if I'm not that kid who can immediately answer something quickly, then I'm an imposter. I'm not that super smart math kid. And all of this stuff should come really easily to me, all the way to calculus, and not just reading about it and talking about the general concepts, which a lot of, I think of that more as good reading skills and good math skills. When you see a 5-year-old who wants to talk about calculus, they can read about it, they talk, oh, isn't this cool? But actually doing it, the hard part is getting through multiplication and long division.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I, as a teacher, sometimes would sort of intentionally befuddle my students, particularly math students, or any time when it seemed like there was a one right answer. There would be a question, and then I would give them the answer. And they'd say, okay, we're done. Now what? Well, how do you get from point A to point B? And
Right.
that's what we're really teaching.
Yeah,
Uh,
I love that. That's great.
they get mad at me sometimes, but then they start to get used to it. And it's like, okay. Anyway, so parents are our primary, and homeschooling parents are our primary audience. And you led the Gifted Homeschooler Forum for quite a while. Um, is there any observations that you have, particularly pertaining to homeschool gifted and 2E kids? And why did they opt for homeschool?
Well, so I was the president for 5 years, and it was pretty exciting, interesting, sometimes more interesting than I would have liked. And it was a really great experience. And we did a refounding. GHF had gone down to zero for about 2 months, and so when I and a few other people on the board came in, we had to restart it, resuscitate it, and I'm very proud of where it went. And one of the things that I'm proud of, and this goes along with your question, is that I wanted to redefine the definition of gifted homeschooling.
Mm.
And so, because people think of homeschooling in archaic terms, and how it's like, first of all, it's, you know, schoolhouse schooling and homeschooling. Well, it's not dependent upon the edifice that you're working with, right? It's an attitude. And in our realm, the most successful homeschool parents are really no different from successful parents of kids who have kids in other settings. But what they do have is an attitude of gifted home education.
Mhm.
And so we changed the mission of GHF not to talk about homeschooling as much, but that it was empowered to every gifted family to make strategic, proactive, and intentional educational choices. And that it's not about the parent being, again, the sage on the stage and then having to be the expert in all the topics, which is why they have Ideal for Gifted, right? Uh,
Yep.
and so, but how do you change the paradigm and understand that your job is to be the project manager and make decisions, and that homeschooling or mixed schooling, all that doesn't matter, because after a while it's like, well, they do some stuff at home and then we go, meet up groups, and then we go to Ideal for Gifted, and we, or my child may be going to the public school, but even if they go to the public school, they're not necessarily getting their academic needs met. And for some
Mhm.
gifted kids, not necessarily 2E, gifted kids will go to public school so that they can get their social needs met, whatever that is. I'm not sure that's always true, because the
Right.
asynchronous development, I think they really just need to be with each other and
Yeah.
also learn to communicate with the normies. Uh, but uh, but the parents can still be in charge of making sure that they're actually doing the acceleration that schools won't do. Schools, at best, for gifted education models, do enrichment models, which I know you're
Mm.
very aware of. So, but a lot of those enrichment models is, how do you take a gifted kid and allow them to go wider in the current curriculum, or in the current standards. So, and they may move up a little bit. A sixth grader could do seventh, eighth grade work, but that sixth grader may be ready for calculus or
Right.
college level work. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to happen from home, because you're not going to get that at school. And also, some parents, they have to go to work and they want to just send the kids to school. And I've interviewed and I've met parents who have been full-time workers and homeschoolers, and they figure it out somehow. But it's not something I would wish on anybody. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But the choices are infinite. And the reason why there's not a fit, which is the question that you were asking me, is that goes back to one of the first things I said to you, which is that schools are built. Schools, if it were a business, they'd be out of business. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's what we ask of schools. In business, one of the things that, businesses that have started doing the last 50 years is they ask, what are my core capabilities? What are my core skills? And then who are the core people that I can support? Well, public schools don't have that choice. They have to take everybody, and then they have to be everything to everybody. And that's painful, it's expensive, and that's part of what's the broken model. The other part is age leveling, which I think totally breaks the public school model. But it's there, and if your primary concern is, being with other people your age group, then that's what you get. But you can't just rely on it for that. But meanwhile, while the school's doing this impossible job, how do they deal with a twice exceptional kid whom they don't necessarily even understand when they see him? And one of the things that I found in my research is that most teachers, rather, let me take it from the opposite angle. Teachers who are very good at working with twice exceptional children like you, um, the first thing they're able to do is look at the child and say, oh, they're not being weird. They're not incompetent as a learner. They're just dealing with this, that, and that. And now I have to get creative and do some problem solving around that. And most teachers don't know how to do that. And most teachers aren't educated to do that, have the knowledge to do it, nor do they understand not just neurodiversity, but neurodiversity, which includes gifted education. Because
Yeah.
that's somehow, gifted education is a bad word and not necessarily considered another form of neurodiversity in a lot of circles.
Right. Right. So that what you said resonates with me a lot. I have often told parents that really, when they're educating their, or they're concerned about the education of their gifted or 2E child, it's kind of like that they are going to make a quilt, that there's lots of pieces. There's pieces in the community, there's pieces at the school, there's pieces in lots of different places, and it's their job to find the pieces and to stitch them together. And so the idea that an education would be like a one package deal is probably kind of illogical because human
Yeah,
beings are individuals. I mean, there are things about which we're all the same, but there's a whole lot of things about which we are individuals. So that really resonates with me, and I think it will really resonate with our audience too, because sometimes they're concerned about, well, how do I do all these things for my child? Well, you don't. You facilitate a bunch of things,
right, right.
and you don't have to actually reinvent the wheel. Oh. I mentioned in your bio, and I'd like to just touch on this before we run out of time. You recently created the Gelston scale. That's a tongue twister.
Have to
Gelston
say that 12 times fast.
of cognitive diversity. What the heck is that? And
Well,
should parents
I
know about it? Would be helpful for their
uh,
children?
so not yet. So
Okay.
it's the first revision of it, and it's a strength-based approach to understanding adults and children through their neurodiversity. I am a believer, and I think that this research that I did, quantitative research, showed that people who were diagnosed as ADHD, uh, ADD, or dyslexic may
Mhm.
actually be different learning types,
Mm,
and that the people who are in the DSMs and reach that threshold of ADHD and ASD and dyslexia. I mean, let me take a break for a second. These are not like disorders like
right.
schizophrenia or anxiety. These are just, why might a kid have a problem in school learning or in
Right.
the workplace, right? These are not deep-seated issues. But what they are, as far as I'm concerned, especially for most of the population, as far as I'm concerned, are sub-threshold to these diagnoses.
Hmm.
So we are a collection of ASD strengths, ADHD strengths, dyslexia strengths, and those are the three I focused on. And so we can look at a person by examining those three profiles and see which parts of those profiles make up their strength
Mm,
package, who they are as a collection of strengths. And what
mm,
this does is it takes us out of the medical model of fixing a
mm,
broken learner, and it also takes us out of the model of remediation, where
mm,
we're always trying to fix a broken kid and we're holding them back. And this is part of the reason why 2E kids hate school so much, is that, so if someone like us who struggles with reading and then they get put into the reading remediation program, they're missing out on the stuff that they can really learn
mm,
and where they can really grow, and their strengths could be, developed. A great resource for this is the Dyslexic Advantage, the IDs, and they talk about different types of thinking that come
mm,
along with this. And I know I identify with at least two of those
mm,
types of thinking in that. And those are the skills that you should be looking at for a kid. And what I also know is that working with kids is that, and here's an interesting piece, and here's something that's important for families, and it's almost an aside, but it's not, is that I get a lot of kids where families come to me, especially siblings of children. I'll get at first the kid who's the real genius, right? But then they have the sibling who hates math. And I'm like, you know what? Don't push them. I'll see them in a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years. And so I've gotten a lot of those kids that all of a sudden 12 and 13, where they hadn't done math in forever, and they've kind of forgotten about it. And now they get a chance to learn, and we go back to third grade math, and we fly through the early stuff. And
Right.
the whole relationship with math has changed. And gifted kids, even if they're not an early math learner,
Mhm.
when it gets to be their time and their readiness is there, they fly through the topics and they have all of a sudden a new sense of confidence and able to
Mm.
deal with it. And it's pretty exciting. So, and so to go with that, with the strength-based approaches, you don't have to, because the development is asynchronous, you don't have to obsess with getting everything on an age-based approach. Sometimes a kid who's really struggles in math, you know what? They can start later. And for me as a reader, I am now a voracious reader. I read at bed every night. I got my Kindle with a black and white screen on it, so I don't wake up Mrs. Gelston or Ms. Gelston. And so I love reading, but that didn't happen until I was in my 20s and I was able to solve my own reading issues. And part of it was just by strength and excitement, and I worked my way through it, which I really struggled to do at a younger age.
One of the things that sort of surprised me, which knowing you probably should not have surprised me, but on your website, one of the things that you talk about, particularly to people who are considering having you as their math tutor, is that you talk about love and hugs. What
Mhm.
love and hugs have to do with gifted education, twice exceptional education, success in math, and
I
such?
feel like you're Tina Turner here. You want to know what love's got to do with it.
What's love got
Um,
to do with it, Barry?
well, there's different meanings of love, right? There's the love I have for my wife, for my son, but there's also love, which is having an open heart and being accepting. And so, like when I meet you and we speak, Mary Grace, you are one of those people who embody love. And I know that because when I speak with you, you are an open, kind person who is just accepting, and you're not judgmental, and you're interested in caring and being present. And sound familiar? Whether you, I know it's uncomfortable to hear
You're
it,
gonna
but
make me
this is
blush.
mission accomplished. So, uh, and I think that's what it is. And I think as an educator, we need to do that. We need to um, have an attitude of love and openness and kindness and acceptance. There's nothing, everything's wonderful about peace, love, and understanding. And that's where it comes in. And it's you're in a peaceful moment with the other person. You're not in competition. You're not in a battle with them. You're not dealing with all these cultural pressures that say, yeah, got to do this, you got to do that. You're just present and in the moment. And to me, I mean, that's maybe a little too hippie for some people, but that's what, to me, love on a day-to-day basis, that's love and kindness. And to me, that's fully integrated. So, and the hugs I don't do online, which is good. But so I'm safe. We're all safe from that too. But it's also, I do believe that at home, that so much of learning at home is about love and that it's a parent's love. And for a long time, for those of us who've been around education for a long time, we know things like what was it, lap reading, and it really was trying to emulate what parents did at home. But the most beautiful things is, you start, you know, good night moon, and you are cuddled and you love each other, and you're looking at the pictures, good night moon, good night. I forgot actually, my son's 30, uh, but math should be that way too. All learning should have that feeling to it. And I think that should never end because learning is this one natural thing that we do in life. And it can't be a chore. I mean,
Right.
there's so many chores in life, but learning is this one natural thing that we do, and that's what we do naturally. Is we're learning machines. Humans are learning machines. Why would we want to make this painful and put so much pressure into it? And it's our greatest gift is our ability to learn, and as humans, our ability to openly and creatively problem solve, take in information to code it into concepts, language and the concepts and visual images. pretty exciting stuff, right?
Yeah. So this correlates with why you maybe were very active with SANG, because SANG is about supporting the emotional needs of the gifted. Does that
Hmm.
sort of flow together?
That's exactly it. And to me, I've always felt that, and if you want to get, the buzzwords today are things like trauma and anxiety, and which was becoming, buzzwords at SANG when I was on the board 10 or 12 years ago. And and so a lot of that trauma, the learned trauma of it, goes back to what we were talking about, is how do you de-stress? How do you relax? And having that attitude, uh, fit in with my perspective on life. And also, there was a selfish thing too. I loved that was like my first place for meeting the gifted community and meeting people in psychology and education and people like you again, who, just really good people in gifted land. I just fell in love with everybody there, and I wanted to give back to that community.
Yeah. So why, well, are there different social and emotional needs for gifted and TUI students than for most students?
I feel like this is one of those softball questions I should knock out of the park, but it is complicated. And so in general, people are people on one hand. On the other hand, uh, gifted people are neurodiverse, and neurodiverse people have different wiring than the normal person. And so their emotions respond differently, and they respond to different things, and social justice issues, anxiety, especially like with people in more of the ASD profile, they're so physically and some of the tactile issues that are different that you need to understand. So, I met at NAGC, not I think across from your booth at
Mm,
NAGC, they had Holzhauer, the guy from Jeopardy, and I got
yes.
to meet him. And so there was a moment where he was like, "Would you like to take a picture with me?" And he was very well rehearsed and practiced that he knew he should ask me that. And then I got closer to him, and all of a sudden at that moment, as I'm getting my phone, he didn't do the usual arm behind my back. I can feel him going shoulder to shoulder with me. I'm like, all right, so he has physical things where he doesn't want to get too physically touchy with other people. And I knew immediately that that was something special for him as a gifted person. And
Mhm.
so there's so many examples like that, and why that's and you may appear like I have a good friend in this community that I know from saying he's a great guy, and sometimes I don't know he's not showing when he's really hurt, and I think he's almost joking. And there have been a couple of times when I start to laugh with him and he starts to cry. I'm like, oh my God, I totally misread you and misunderstood you. I'm sorry. And if I experience that with an adult, you think about how much more that is so with a
Mm,
child. And
right.
so the emotional needs are different, and they're more intense. If you're a Dabrowski person, then and you look at the overexcitabilities, and you can see that the emotions just jump off a lot faster.
Mhm. One of the things that I've always sort of theorized is that if you're going to be highly aware of academic things, the likelihood is that you're going to be highly aware of other things in your life, other kinds of stimuli. And so it's, hard to walk around the world with like no skin on, it's much more easily hurt, but it also is much more easily alert to. And in some cases, as a teacher, I've actually like, well, if it's bothering that person, then it's probably bothering a lot of other people, but this person's almost like my canary in the coal mine. And
Right.
they can help me understand how the other kids are feeling who may not have as much sensitivity to it. Something as simple as doing that.
Yeah. Is
Um,
it the lights? Is it the
or
fluorescent
picture
light?
breath, or they're
Yeah,
uh, uh,
right.
there's the fluorescent lights are giving off a hum that I, who has to wear hearing aids, I don't hear it.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm the opposite. That was totally drive me nuts. And the fluorescent, so that little buzzing sound,
yeah.
my wife is really sensitive to the buzzing sound. And for me, that weird glow of a
Mm.
fluorescent light really like puts me into a brain fog. So I'm really sensitive to stuff like that. This is
Yeah.
the safe place to share that, right?
Well, what you said earlier about it's not about a deficit model, it's about a difference. And we celebrate difference in the sense that, somebody who is very, very strong in their field becomes eminent, they win Nobel Prizes. So I try to help the kids understand that you may feel very different and you may not realize that you're a diamond in the rough because you might look like
Hmm.
any old lumpy rock, but given
Uh-huh.
circumstances, you will be um, moved to reveal yourself, and then you and we will see that diamond. I also, sometimes they don't know about that, but I'll say, well, what about a geode? And they're like, oh, when you crack the geode, it's all like, I'm like, so if the kids might
It's
seem
the magic word. You found the
oh,
magic word in geode. I love that.
geode, yeah.
One of the things that I know we've talked about this and you understand, but the flip side of that issue too is that uh, I think we put so much pressure on these kids that when we talk about things like a diamond in the rough or becoming eminent, I'm always concerned from that talent development perspective that sometimes we put too much pressure on the kids and I really dislike that term gifted underachiever because it's
Mm,
not up to somebody else to decide what another person's achievement level is, or you could be so much, you can do this, you can do that. Well, none of your business what I can or can't do. And and it may be that you just don't like it. It'll make you miserable even if you do
right.
something well. Susan Baum on her uh, on her suite of tools, one of the questions I love that she has, the way that she breaks it up is, what skill there are two questions, math. Are you good at it? Do you enjoy it?
Hmm.
Right? So there's a difference in being
Hmm.
good at it and enjoying it. You may be really good, but it's like, I don't want to be a mathematician just because I'm good at that. And or I love reading doesn't mean I want to be reading all day. I just happen to be good at it. And
Right.
I may be other things I'm really good at. I just haven't found it yet. And it's about what fits who you are. And it's not just kid stuff. This is adult stuff, which is
Absolutely.
who is the person supposed to become as they change over time and keep becoming different people. Because
Mm,
we're allowed to be different people as we age. And I know we've had discussions around different phases in our lives and things that we've done, and um, and we're allowed to explore different parts of who we are at different parts of our lives, and we don't have to be just one thing, which is defined by somebody else's version of what it means for us to achieve at our level.
yeah. Um, Quick story before we have to wrap it up. My eldest daughter was in constant competition with this other kid all the way through school, like kindergarten through grade 12 in math. And I thought when she was going to apply for universities that she'd be going into something in math. And she turned to me and went, what? Are you crazy? I don't even like math. I was like, what? And she goes, I just didn't like that he kept winning.
All right.
And she went into law because they had an after school program for mock trial and for debate. And that's where she really went happy. So I definitely hear you. And for the parents out there, just because somebody's good at something doesn't mean they will be able to pursue it and also find happiness. So what you said that Susan Baum talks about, there are things that you're good at and there's things that you're like. So I liked art, but I got B's. I got A's in everything else. So my parents were like, what? This, to them, it didn't make sense, but it made sense to me because it was open-ended. It was creative. It made me think. It was challenging. I couldn't get it right just off the bat. So sometimes I think we parents sort of assume that if you're good at something, you're going to want to do it. But
I wonder if I can take one more thing I want to say about this is
sure.
that so much, so this is for parents and the stress of parenting. And, I made up an expression about in the gifted community, a common thing is trying to keep up with the Einsteins. And there's so much pressure and to have your child become something. Matt Zakreski, I sat in one of his presentations the other day at NAGC, and he said something that I loved. He said, the goal in life isn't to be happy, it's to be self-regulated.
Oh.
And I was like, wow, that was pretty good, Matt. So,
Yeah.
and that really is important. So that's my thing I want to say to parents out there is that with your child, the goal isn't for them to meet all these cultural demands. It isn't to my mom and dad taught me to do this. My grandparents want me to do this. My culture says I have to do this. The people in my neighborhood say I have to do this. I have this burning feeling from when I was a kid that I feel like I have guilt that I didn't do this and I want my kid to do this. I take all my anxieties that I wish I had done for myself and then my kid has to now do it, right? As as a parent, and this is
Yeah.
the pain that we go through. And we all go through this unless somebody's very special and God bless them, right? But it's how do you let go of that? How do you let go of all of those pressures and just be present one-on-one with your child or one-on-three with your children or whatever the number is, right? And just see them for who they are and let them become who they're supposed to be. And that our job is to help them to learn how to achieve within their comfortable zone and do it in a way where they're feeling self-regulated and relaxed and comfortable. They can be pushed to be a little dysregulated and then come back again. That's just fine. But how do they keep pushing and feel comfortable learning?
Amen. Well, I was going to say, lastly, do you have any words of wisdom for our parents? But I think you just did it.
I
Oh,
did, and I jumped the gun. I'm sorry. I
no,
apologize.
that's absolutely where we were going. So it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being here. And virtual hug.
Oh yeah, and love and hugs, and you're the best. Everybody I know that knows you throughout the gifted and 2E community thinks that you're one of the most special people in our community, and that you're just a walking bundle of goodness and love. And so you're a gift that keeps on giving, and we're very lucky. And I know the folks at
And I
Ideal
did
for
not
Gifted
pay him to say that. Okay.
yet.
Well, IDEAL stands for innovative, differentiated, enriched, accelerated learning. And I think that's what we've been talking about here today. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
see you soon.
I can't wait. Take good care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.